Hi, this is Zach with WORN&WOUND, and today I'll be taking a look at the MeisterSinger Phanero. MeisterSinger is a brand that's been around for a while. We featured them a couple times on WORN&WOUND, one of our favorite brands to go check out in Basel. They always have some really cool things. At the most recent Basel in 2016, they released the Phanero line, which really kind of took us by surprise, and it's just a watch, honestly, I really found very appealing. So one of the signature things with MeisterSinger, the most signature thing, if you will, is that their watches feature single hands. They have other watches with more hands, but they're generally based on that principle. So you'll have a chronograph, but the chronograph will have a single time hand, or you'll have a regulator with, et cetera, et cetera. Their most simple watches are just one-handed watches. So that immediately kind of creates its own kind of customer base, its own thing. They're very, a one-handed watch is very different than a two- or three-handed watch because you don't read time as precisely on them. They're much more about kind of a relaxed telling of time, a much more casual telling of time. It's not for precision nuts, it's not for accuracy nuts, and it's not for people who need to see a watch in motion. This hand here, you can read the hour and minute from, or an approximate minute, but obviously there's no active seconds, and you'd have to be very, very perceptive to actually see that hand move. So it's just a very different type of watch, but it's one that certainly is appealing, and I think their style has kind of caught up a little bit more with that concept. So they used to be a little bit more classically styled, and now they've started to play a little bit more with design, a little more with color, and this watch here, the Phanero, I think is a perfect example of kind of where they've gotten. So there's a few different models of this, but this one was particularly striking. It features a silver sunray dial with a red applied index. So that's immediately a very striking detail, very visually appealing. You have this cherry red that's just popping off of the sunray gray. It's a unique looking watch there. I mean, in some ways it's aggressive, but at the same time it comes across as kind of clean and precise. A little bit of a kind of a Bauhaus feel off of the whole thing. And then this massive, white hour hand here. So, when you look at this index around, you do have a finer index for kind of getting a little bit of a more precise read. Each mark stands for a 5-minute interval. So there it's saying it's like 3:45, just about. But yeah, like I said, just about. It's probably not exactly 3:45, could be 44, could be 46. That's kind of what you have to live with a one-handed watch. But it's not honestly that troublesome, especially since you probably have a cell phone in your pocket that'll tell you more precise time. What we really, really liked about this watch was actually the case and the size. So it's a 35 millimeter watch, so that's much smaller than I think some of their other models. They did have a model called the Neo, which was probably around there. But at 35, you have this kind of interesting vintage territory. Immediately, the style and size brings to mind watches like the Stova Antia, as well as the Nomos Tangente and Tangomatic. And this one, though, has a little bit of unique spin on that style. So when you look at it from the side, you really kind of get a sense of what makes it different. It's a very thin case, which is brought thanks to the manual wound movement in here. It's powered by a Sellita SW210, by the way, so it's a very high-quality movement. It has a very thin kind of mid case, and then a bezel that kind of angles in a little bit, so you get this nice facet effect here. Those other watches I mentioned before are usually very kind of a straight just cylinder, which has a nice look, but this has a little bit more texture to it, a little bit more detailing, and I think it really kind of makes the watch, especially because you get this play in finishing. So you've polished on the side, then a really nice satin brushing along the edge of the bezel there, and then when you come back to the top again, you have another line of polish. And when you look from above, because of the angle of that bezel, you can still see some of the brushing. So you have this really nice effect of having a few different rings kind of coming out from the dial. It's just very attractive. Now I'll show it to you on my wrist. So on the wrist, like I said, this is a 35 millimeter watch, and I think a lot of people are going to hear that number and run, or they're going to say, it's a women's watch. But I think anyone who wears vintage watches will know 35 is perfectly acceptable and actually a very nice size for kind of an average wrist size. I have a 7-inch wrist, so that is kind of like just kind of in the middle of average for average even. And I think this watch fits me wonderfully, in fact. The dial is still got a lot of real estate here, has nice presence. It's not too much. I think if this watch was too big, that red might be a little bit ostentatious, a little too aggressive. Here, it's a nice little bit of flair, a nice little pop of color in this otherwise totally kind of gray terrain. Then the lug to lug here, 41 millimeters, totally comfortable. I've seen watches this style that have been larger, and they just enlarge these cases. And when you have these kind of sharp faceted lugs too close to the edge of your wrist, it gets a little bit odd, a little uncomfortable. And here also you have this really nice strap that comes with the watch. It's 18 millimeters, soft gray suede. It's really nice, obvious choice to go with the dial here, the kind of silver gray dial, and I think it does a good job of also further accentuating that red. So that was a really nice choice. All in all, I just have to say, like the MeisterSinger Phanero, I think it's a nice watch with a lot of style that isn't hitting you over the head with anything. It's unique, not just aesthetically, but also because of that one-hand watch, of the one hand. I love that it's manual wound. There's just something very kind of classic watch about this while still being contemporary and fun. The price tag on the MeisterSinger Phanero is around $1,500. I think it's like $1,470, something like that. So that puts it, I think actually pretty fairly priced. It's neither inexpensive or terribly expensive. Obviously, it's a very fine timepiece with a Swiss movement, and that's pricing is in line with the rest of their watches. They are available in some retail stores, so you do have that pricing built in. But overall, I just think this is just a great watch from the brand, and I'm excited to see where else they go with this line and what else they pursue in the near future. Please take a look at the article on WORN&WOUND.com. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Thank you.